Great. I'm David McCorquodale. I'm a naturalist who lives in Unama'ki and Cape Breton. When I was in university, ferns were one of the things that I was really fascinated by. And then I worked. Now that I'm retired, I'm getting more into ferns again. A few years ago, the people from the Atlantic Canada Conservation Data Center, who we've heard from about this, found Dryopteris gouldiana, Goldie's wood fern, which is a relatively rare fern in Canada. It had not been known in Nova Scotia. It was found in a really rich uh, floodplain situation along the Bedeque River. And back in 2023, Steve McGraw, who's on the in the meeting tonight, we hiked in there. For a Dryopteris, it's really big and took us a while, but we eventually found it. And these are a couple of the photos of it. Uh, on the right-hand side, like it's waist high, which for a Dryopteris is pretty big. And you can see this is the third week of June, and it's not fully much like it hasn't leafed out completely. Or is it frond out for a fern? I'm not sure. But anyway, it was you could see that it was still a relatively young plant. And I'm going to move on to another Dryopteris, but I'm going to talk about two others briefly to start off with. The next one is bronze wood fern, which is and brawn as in Braun, the person, as in bronze holly fern, the same person. But it's a hybrid with crested wood fern and spinulose wood fern. So when I learned ferns, there were lots of things that we now call different species that were all lumped under spinulose wood fern, and this is one of them. And both it's interesting because both of these ferns are tetraploids. So the species have a hybrid origin, and each one of these Dryopteris tends to have 41 chromosomes in their genome. So the tetraploids end up with 82. And so these are observations of mine of the two parents from relatively close to where uh, we found this. Okay, so again, with Steve McGraw, we went in last September on the St. Columba Road, which is near Washabuck in the middle of Cape Breton. And you can see it's got some of the characteristics of crested wood fern, the way the pinnae sit up and um, how they're reflexed along the stipe. But it's also got some aspects of the spinulose wood fern that is broad in the middle, narrows at the base, and the fronds are more like the spinulose wood fern than the crested wood fern, that they're broader and not as um, not as thick. And there's relatively few of these recorded in Nova Scotia, but it's interesting. Both of the parents of this hybrid are also found in Western Europe and the UK, and this hybrid is known there as well. So it's a widespread hybrid, but not a common one. Whoops. Then the next one, this is one of the polypodies, and it's scattered around throughout Nova Scotia. It tends to like shadier, a little bit moister areas than the common one. Uh, what Polypodium virginianum. It's that's the common polypody that we see. This one was on Kelly's Mountain in Cape Breton. Again, it was found by the Conservation Data Center group during a BioBlitz that I took part in 2023. And Steve and I went in to see this one in July this year. Tramped in. Steve had been in to see it a couple of times before. Uh, it's it's interesting. It is the Polypodium virginianum is a has a hybrid origin too, and Appalachian rock cap fern is one of the parents of our common polypody. And you can tell it from the regular polypody because it doesn't have the blunt round tips on the end of the pinna, and they tend to start wide and get narrow as they go out. And it's when you I had looked at pictures and wasn't quite sure, but when I actually saw it, you can see that this is quite distinct, and it was relatively easy to see. Now, it also helped that several other people had been there, and uh, we I walked into a known location, so it's easier that way. Um, so that's one. And then the last one I have is to me a fascinating little fern, curly grass fern. Generally, they're often called comb ferns, and you can see why from um, uh, the where the group of spores at the end, and the you can't see the fronds or the leaves of this because this was in October out at Ballin, and it grows in these well, it's widespread across the province in boggy areas, but because it is so small and inconspicuous, it's only about 2 or 3 inches high. It's difficult to see. I suspect it's just as easy to find in October when there's a lot less vegetation, a lot fewer things growing there. So on the right hand is the bog, and if you see um, you can see the lichens, and then a little bit of reddish, and then the browner area in the middle there, where there's very little vegetation. That's where the curly grass ferns were growing. And again, this is out of Ballin, a place known for lots of interesting plants out there. Anyway, that's a few of the ferns that I've found fascinating on Cape Breton for the last few years. That that's it, Bob.